Thank you, Jonathan. I think he's set the scene in terms of the fact we're at very exciting times. They're very tough. They're very challenging. But I also think that the cosmetic thought that location research is no longer important is out the window, that essentially, hopefully, that this presentation and the subsequent ones you'll hear will stress how important it is to use the techniques. I'd like to give you a general review of why they're important. I think they're mutating, changing, call it what you want, in terms of their application and relevance to retail. I'd like to very quickly, because I think about noon we have to hand over, talk about the applications for pure play physical retailers, the online retailers, and those who are converging into omni-channel retailers. From either direction. And of course, the big news from the States, which you've probably heard, is that Amazon is rumored to be opening 400 stores, bricks and mortar stores. So far, we've seen 2. They're both bookstores. But whether they'll stay as bookstores is another matter. But they are coming from that direction. People like John Lewis are going from the bricks and mortar origin, using their Waitrose branches very intelligently as click and collect points.
Do we know why Amazon is doing that, going to bricks and mortar stores? Did they say why are they doing that?
Well, they haven't said. Now, what would you conclude? Would you conclude that says that a pure online operation is not the optimum way to go? I think that's the biggest admission I've heard from Amazon. They've not said it.
They're making a profit now, finally, Amazon?
I think they're still losing money, which of course is a central problem for every retailer in the world, is as long as you've got people like Amazon who don't want to make money, you aren't playing by the same rules. But I mean, to answer your question, I think you don't look at what people say, you look at what they do. And what they're doing is saying that pure play online is a very limited, or has limitations, okay? So let's start with brick and mortar, the traditional retailers. Obviously, in this environment with low growth, strong online competition, strong competition from bricks and mortar retailers, you have to do a much better job with existing stores and facilities and shopping centers, as Jonathan's laid out. It's not just that, it's the rising costs of business. In this country, one of the big curses is the business rates, the property taxes. Just this weekend, there was a story of a hairdressing salon in Richmond, Surrey, and it's the usual small facility. It pays £36,000 a year in business tax. And the business tax in Britain, business rates, dates to a law of 1601. And obviously, today's business environment is a bit different than it was in 1601. So things like that have to be addressed. But governments are very reluctant to do it because they're going to lose revenue. So to face these pressures, there's a variety of tools that we use in store location research, which can help. First of all, in-store customer surveys at existing facilities. Loyalty card data, if you have a loyalty card program, is another input. You've got to understand what you have before you can successfully replicate that in the future. I think loyalty data has been somewhat overblown. There's been a lot of PR. Tesco's difficulty in selling dunnhumby, I think, speaks volumes. Again, it's not what you say, it's what you do, what the market does. Importantly, they may tell you all about your customer and what they buy with you, but they don't tell you anything about how good or bad your store operations are. They don't tell you what products or brands you could have sold if you had them.
Yeah.
They do not tell you what is being bought at your competition. Awful lot of limitations about loyalty card data, and in my opinion, they've been a bit of a exaggerated option. In-store surveys tell people you care about their opinions. They also enable you to reach a cross-section of people who are shopping you. And they can help you in terms of identifying what really is your catchment area or trade area at each individual store. We'll come to that. Really important to do this homework, both for your bricks and mortar stores and for your online sales, if you have them. Because I think we're going to see an awful lot of store closures coming, as Jonathan has hinted. Depending on the country, depending on the sector, we're seeing an awful lot of store closures, and it's just going to increase. That's your wake-up call Monday morning. You know? So localizing, let's talk about that. This is one of the tools that you get from in-store research. It gives you the ability to localize or tailor a store to its individual catchment area. Awful lot of retailers talk about this, but a lot less is actually done. And one of the problems is that for most chain retail organizations, it's not in their DNA. You want to have the same format everywhere, and if you do that, you've got to pick the right locations. IKEA does that very successfully. They don't change a thing. It's a big blue and yellow box, same interior, whether it's Beijing or Montreal. But for many retailers, increasingly, one of the ways to squeeze more sales out of facilities is going to be to localize individual stores better to their local markets, as defined by demographics, by the competition they have, and what are the spending propensities in those local markets.
Yeah, just real quick, you know, we were looking at opening a store without a pharmacy, and we have a few, maybe 20 or so like that, but you would have thought we were trying to build a store on a cruise ship or something. Like the drama that went on about doing this, a small store without a pharmacy, you know, we're going to be 7-Eleven, it's a small convenience store in the U.S., which isn't true, never looked like a 7-Eleven, but to your point, that doing the different things can often be very somewhat painful, and the companies that are used to, Walgreens just stamped out 14,000 square foot stores again and again and again for years.
Especially when Walgreens has historically been run by pharmacists.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
not done, right? But I was going to give the example in purchasing propensities. People, incredibly wide variations in spending depending on demographics. And prescriptions is one of the best examples. You know, age, gender, ethnic background, very powerful determinants of the level of spending.
I had an interesting conversation recently with someone who was at Home Depot when they had 16 stores, and he said they only did big out-of-town locations, and he wanted to propose a different format, so we proposed one for Brooklyn, a very dense urban environment, and it was completely different from other stores, and so they met a huge amount of resistance, and they changed the range drastically to cater to a lower transaction value. They increased the number of tills in the queuing space because they're expecting to put more volume through the store versus, and I said it was their most successful store at the time they opened. So I think you've got to be open to understanding what the drivers of this are, but you've got to get it right.
Yes.
Multiple floors sometimes in urban areas.
Yeah.
And that means having the location research skills to recognize what is different about a local market than the markets you've historically served. And here's an example of a locality. This is suburban Virginia, and we have the Potomac River. We have a high-end grocery store here in McLean, and you can see how this is from a customer origin survey, and each dot is a customer. And that pretty much tells you straight away where the locality is that we should be really serving. And you can do this on any individual store. It's a very important tool. This produces analogs, which are a forecasting method, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. But the diagnostic applications for existing stores is enormous from this in terms of merchandising and operating slightly differently for the local market.
Do you know what the legalities are like doing that? I know in some states in the US you're not allowed to ask for address details in the store. I think it's California and one other state. Others it is. It seems to be quite a mixed bag with regards to how easily you can do that sort of research.
Well, California is one of those. You cannot ask people for their zip code anymore. It's that tough. You can ask people for the street they live on and the nearest intersecting cross streets, so you are not asking for a specific address. That may be one way. That needs an in-store survey. That gets around, I think, that privacy concern.
Specifically on zip codes.
Yeah.
Excuse me, in California.
Yeah. Anyway, there will continue to be, for bricks and mortar retailers, the need to expand stores, refurbish, reformat, relocate, all of those sorts of decisions, which we'll probably hear more about from Todd later on, involve the location research methods that you will hear over the next 3 days. You have to be able to forecast what the turnover increase or the sales increase will be before you carry out this capital spending. So this is a continuing need for location research methods. Basically to make stores and shopping centers more attractive, because online is changing everything in terms of what convenience expectations are, as we've touched on already. If you're a British retailer, perhaps it's yet another reason for getting out of a town center to a retail park where you can offer a drive-through for click and collect, or at least free parking with no traffic wardens, where people can relax and actually make purchases without being harassed by terrorists or traffic wardens. So, I mean, those are the sorts of decisions that will have to be made. If you're going to relocate from a town center to a retail park, again, you need a sales forecast or a turnover projection to justify that decision, make sure it's going to be a profitable activity. As I said, at the individual store level, there's a lot of reformatting opportunities. You may wish to change a store in terms of its price positioning, but I think nowhere is it more dramatic when we get to shopping centers, and especially the large ones. Now, Britain's fortunate in the sense that very few regional malls were built, in the sense that larger numbers in the States are now being basically repositioned or demalled to become lifestyle centers where the stores face out rather than in. If you think about the traditional design of a regional mall or shopping center, the owners, developers wanted the stores to face inwards to force people to come in to be exposed to the stores. And that's exactly the opposite of what most consumers now want. So increasingly in the States, malls are being not demolished, but completely rebuilt so they face outwards. And that way, they serve targeted trips. And one of the things that we haven't discussed so far is that the whole process of consumer behavior is becoming much more targeted. You know, it's that sort of research online at home, and then I make fewer trips because I know where I'm going. I'm going to go to Best Buy. I'm going to buy there. I go to Best Buy, and we'll go home. I don't want to browse in a shopping center for 4 hours. And increasingly, I think the figure was that over Christmas and Thanksgiving in the US this year, the number of trips fell by 10% from the previous year, which shows you how much people now are targeting their activities because they're so much better informed when they leave home than they used to be. So that's driving changes and major investments in a lot of shopping centres. You heard Jonathan say that 40% of those in the UK are going to be refurbished. And obviously, when you carry out that degree of investment as a shopping centre owner, you badly, badly need to have a sales forecast and be able to run the numbers to make sure that it's going to be profitable.
This is going to change the nature of comparison shopping and agglomeration and clustering externalities.
Yes. It is changing. It's having a negative effect because people are doing it online rather than physically. Yes. Especially as the cost of broadband comes down, more people have it, less need to wander. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So we get to the buzzword. It's a nice way of saying store closings, but network rationalization. I've tried to define it there. It's the intelligent downsizing to focus physical bricks and mortar resources where they are most productive. You know, how many of those stores do you need as opposed to where do you serve demand online? And that's the big question now for most retailers. As you close stores and you rationalize your network, you need to minimize the losses of sales and market share while maximizing the savings on property and other costs. So that's the objective. And obviously, which stores do you invest in, which ones do you expand, downsize, or close? And store closure analysis is a very natural part of store location research. And the gravity model, which you'll hear about on Thursday, is a very central tool in that. And we have been using our gravity model very extensively on the East Coast of the US for situations where retailers need to close a store. And the question becomes, if we model this area, which competitor will benefit? Which sister stores will benefit? And going back to the competitor issue, who will be in the market to take our store from us, buy it, adopt the lease, whatever? And who's going to get the most sales? And let's run a forecast for them, quote, so that our attorneys or lawyers or whatever can go to them and say, look, you could get this store for X dollars or pounds or euros. And so it's a very important part of the negotiating tool of getting yourself out of a lease or out of a location. Because you can simulate with a gravity model who's going to benefit and who isn't. So it's part of almost a negotiation tool. But that's going to happen more and more. So, and again, that's a very standard form of location analysis, which you'll hear more about later in the course, but you may already have familiarity with it. So here we are, network rationalization. Oh, I lost my numbers. This is the chart. I'm sorry about Walgreens being on here, Todd. I think you're closing 200 as part of your repositioning. Yeah.
I'll tell you more about it later.
Right. McDonald's led the list with 500 closures this year, 2016. And a lot of that is because, you know, there's been so many other hamburger chains. This is not the internet doing this. This is competition. What the internet has done is, I should be using my pointer here. There. Office Depot, Office Max. That once upon a time, it sounds like a nursery story, you know, but once upon a time, there were 3 major office supply retailers in the United States. Staples, Office Depot, Office Max. Very shortly, there will be one, which will be Staples. Office Depot, Office Max merged. They closed about 400 stores. More closures are coming, another 100 or so. And when Staples gets them, the Federal Trade Commission is currently arguing about what closures occur. But what you're seeing is the death of the big box category killers from the 1980s. These people had the best selections, the best prices in the 1980s, and now the internet is absolutely killing them. So this sector is being demolished by the internet. Same with Barnes & Noble, that's a book retailer. We all know what Amazon has done to them. Walgreens, it's more of a repositioning exercise. Otherwise, an awful lot of clothing retailers, and most interesting here is Walmart. They are now, for the first time, engaging in significant store closures. And what's really interesting is out of the 150-odd stores in the US they're closing, 102 are their express stores, which were the small 15,000 square foot stores they put into small towns. Their whole idea 2 years ago was these would be pickup points. These would be click and collect. This was part of their online strategy. All right? They're closing all of them. So here's another really good example of how much money you can waste on the internet. So.
Walgreens is okay with that, by the way.
Okay. Yes. I'm trying to give you some conflicting points and views here, because I think we all get tunnel vision when we read the press or we read the trade media, we go to conferences. Too often we get, this is the way it's going to be. Well, there's a lot of cross currents going on. These are really exciting, intellectually challenging times. And Walmart's just given a very good example of how you can say, yes, go into online. We're an online omni-channel retailer. 2 years later, they've had to bite the bullet. They don't work. So a variety of reasons there for the large number of store closings that are occurring this year in the United States. Another important application of location research methods, thanks to everything that's going on, the internet, slow economic recovery, if that's a nice way of putting it, and depending on where you are, which country, which sector, there's more and more acquisitions becoming available. There are more and more opportunities for you to lose hundreds of millions of euros, pounds, dollars by carrying out the wrong acquisition too quickly. It's usually a very, very rushed exercise, usually only involving the senior management people who take a very, very superficial, optimistic view on acquisitions. The latest one we know about is Sainsbury's is going to future-proof itself by buying Argos, the catalog showroom operation. We'll see how that goes. If it happens, one of the first things will be they will exit an awful lot of property, which is currently occupied by Argos. We know that. To do it right, you should be, or retailers should be, taking a look at the site and facility characteristics of each and every store they'll be picking up. They should be estimating what they think the catchment areas are, their demographics, their spending potential characteristics. They should be looking at the competition that the retailer faces and how they're doing against it, and carrying out some form of consumer research to know exactly what they're buying.
And you should get it within 2 or 3 days to do so.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. 2 or 3 days is close to being stupidity, right?
But it happens.
Yes. Yes.
Research is like that. You
Yes.
talk about it for years, do it, and then you have a week. Or
Yeah.
For the research, for the analysis.
The only thing I'd suggest to you is be proactive. Is try and look around your landscape and say, well, you know, I think that Ahold, because they're getting together with Delhaize, are going to have to shed some stores. Let's take a look at which stores they would have to shed. And then of those stores, which ones would we be interested in? And do that before anything ever happens. Because you know as soon as it happens, your chief executives will be hyper. And they'll say, 24 hours, you know? Anyway, and then the other very important thing is if your acquisition takes you into new markets, you are doubling your risk. You better carry out research on the new markets and understand what you're getting yourself in for. So as I say, rather tongue-in-cheek, there will be too many acquisition opportunities as all these conventional retailers do fail over the next few years. Okay. Let's switch very briefly to online retailing and how location research can help online retailers. One of the key techniques I think that stands to help them is the multivariate methods, the multiple regression analysis, in terms of analyzing the sales they are achieving by some form of postal geography, correlating that with demographics or lifestyle data if you have that, and having a good understanding of where demographics work for them and where they don't, because that affects promotional budgets, it affects where you promote geographically. And this technique, which is very frequently used in store location research, has a lot to offer a pure online retailer in terms of which markets are good for entry, and then once we've decided to go into those markets, exactly where in those markets do we allocate our promotional spending.
We would like to know what is traditional and what was store-based.
Yes.
That's an important question as well.
And we work with IKEA in the US on their existing store performances, and that's exactly one of the things we're looking at is the by postal geography, what are our store sales, and what are our internet sales. And that's a fascinating piece of research, which is very much an extension of the whole toolkit that you have in location research. Besides that application, another obvious one is locating warehouses and distribution centers. Where exactly do you need those to service the pattern of demand that you are getting in Britain or Australia or wherever you operate? And then more importantly, and I think this is a really hot area, is the location of click and collect facilities. Those can be at your existing stores, the way John Lewis is using Waitrose branches for their click and collect, or they could be at freestanding sites. Now, Ahold in the US, with their Peapod operation, have built a number of freestanding Peapod pickup points. And the whole issue there is, where do you need those? Given your network of stores, where can you have click and collect at the store? After that, where are the voids that need to be filled in terms of producing other successful click and collect facilities? And here the paramount issue is not to rack up your overhead property expenses by opening too many click and collect points. The other scenario is to do what Loblaw in Canada has done, is have a joint venture with a 7-Eleven, or selected stores operated by other people, and have deals with them, so they're essentially leveraging off somebody else's overheads. And that somebody else, 7-Eleven in that case, is gaining the benefit of extra traffic coming to their location that may produce additional sales. And many retailers claim that 20 to 30% of pickups generate additional product sales. So that can be a positive. Then ultimately, and this is all a guess, because I have not worked with IKEA US, UK, or with IKEA Canada, but as one of their new developments is purpose-built pickup stores. There's one in Norwich in Britain. There are 3 in Canada, Halifax, Kitchener, and London. And these are stores that, they're not 300,000 square foot stores like they normally have. These are between 20,000 feet and 40,000 feet. And they say they are pick up and collect stores. But what they're doing is they also have a sales floor, and in that sales floor, they will carry their 100 top movers. So they've got a foot in both camps. And my guess is it's a really good way to test out the potentiality of a local market, to see if there's enough potential there one day to build a big, normal, bricks and mortar, regular store. But these are only 20 to 40,000 feet. But they're fulfilling a short-term need in terms of increasing internet sales, which IKEA wants to do. But it's also with an eye to the future. I believe that that's one of the considerations as well.
Walmart strategy in the past as well, to open small stores somewhere, and when it succeeds, to open a bigger one?
Not really, because they opened those small stores in such tiny towns that there was no potential for the large, full-size store.
They open them even in smaller towns than a Walgreens or a
Yeah.
Boots would go to.
Yeah.
Tiny 8,000
Yeah.
person town.
And what they did in those towns, in many cases, was they closed the local supermarket, and now they've closed the store that closed the local supermarket. So the people in those small towns are left with no grocery store. And that's becoming a bit of an issue. So, now, I think when you look at the size, Halifax, interestingly, was the very first North American store for IKEA going back about 40 years ago. They had to close it then because it didn't generate enough sales. Now they're going back into Halifax, which, if you know that part of the Maritimes, it's not just Halifax. Everybody within 500 kilometers on every island goes to Halifax to do their big shopping, and they'll go there for 4 or 5 days over a weekend. So I think it's very much a test of can we go back into Halifax. But this is a very good, low-risk way of doing it because they're fulfilling another task. They're boosting their internet sales. So. But otherwise, I know nothing about it. But anyway, I try to sum up here. This is the last slide because we are just about there. Just listing, I should use this thing again, shouldn't I? Just listing some of the standard techniques that we have for bricks and mortar. Very simple ones like market penetration analysis, market share analysis. Analog that we'll be doing tomorrow, multivariate we'll be talking about tomorrow, gravities on Thursday. These techniques, particularly these simple ones and the analog method, are very useful for analyzing click and collect points for online retail. And as I said, multivariate methods have application also for that. And here I broke out online retail into click and collect and home delivery options, but gravity models really don't help in the online front. But we do have this whole bevy of other techniques. And I think just try and, over the next 3 days, as you hear all the material, just keep thinking about a twin track, where how does this help me with bricks and mortar? And how does this help me with our online activities? Because I think where we're all going is some sort of blend of online and bricks and mortar. It's just that the blend will vary, first of all, by sector, and also, secondly, by your skills as a retailer. So I think we're all going to that blended omni-channel world, but we have to do so in a very intelligent manner. We do not want to throw away hundreds of millions of dollars, euros, or pounds on failed exercises like Walmart's just gone through. So I think we're on time. So, okay, thank you.